Ngā mihi, kia ora whānau, like, fuck, he's no me. I'm honest, man. I think they've fucked us. I 100% think they fucked our sterile, our immune systems, and all the latest drugs. If you go to fucking the government page, medsafe.co.nz, whatever it is, .government.nz, and you look at all the new drugs that they've okayed without anyone's fucking consent, and it's all things to make us slow, lethargic, and if you look at the side effects, man, it's all the things that people are going through right now. And then once you look at that, then you have to go back and then, hello, why is our immune system, our pregnancy rates going down? And then this guy in this fucking, I went to see the other side. Like, I went to see the other fucking side of the fucking story, and a guy yells out, how are we going to have grandchildren? How can we have done it for our mokopuna if no one gets mokopuna? It's sick. You got the Maori bloody Language Commission selling. They got millions just for their awards. For doing what? For selling. There's no more mokopuna. I'm begging you, Keith. I don't know you, but I know you're a dad, and I'm a dad. And when I heard that, I was like, well, imagine my kids not getting that buzz of having kids. Oh, fuck no, brother. So I'm just begging as fast as I can. I've got all this other shit. I've just tried to get as much information together for you, bro, so you can sort of see where me and a lot of other people are coming from, bro. Globally. All right. Everyone involved. It's like the moon landing. Don't tell us moon landing wasn't real. So actually, there's 2 trillionaire people on the planet right now. All the money in the world cannot get to the moon. Okay, so there was never a moon landing. Okay, finally? JFK, you can no longer fucking search for Martin Luther King's death online. You can no longer do that, whānau. It's disappeared, even though the government killed him. So cut the horse shit. Like the bro said, they've been doing it forever, and the leaders of England and Germany are still the same families. Still the same related people playing games with us. Māori meant to have their own stuff, man, not shared. Irish meant to have their own stuff, not shared so it can be sold to a company, to a corporation. Nah, that's not right, whānau. So yeah, all the love in the world, everyone, whānau. Sorry, I'm an emotional man. I'm worried about my whānau. I'm worried about everyone's whānau. And fucking land theft, man. And I think we've been fucking screwed massively by corporations. And then we sign with America, and then more Māori going to go to war. They just keep sending Māoris to war, keep putting injections into Māoris. We're all Maori somewhere. We're all Indigenous somewhere. We're all from a fucking Hapu or tribe somewhere. It's time to fucking, never mind your rights, you're allowed to eat. Okay, I love you, Seeps, and enjoy the film. And like I said, I would have loved to have cut it down or done a bit more editing there, but this is just, it's not really that sort of film. It's just a lot of information for you fellas, so you can sort of understand and get an understanding that just because it's from TV, if all of the TV and all the newspapers and all of the fucking health places and the Maori Language Commission and the people protesting against it are all getting financially benefiting from the same person, and it wasn't real whānau. And the stats show that it was a variation of influenza, and even if you want to say it was the worst flu you ever had, it wasn't worth stealing everyone's fucking land and water for. So we need to get on the same page. I'm begging you, Keith, this time, please listen to me. I don't care how crazy people think the Sashas or whatever the fuck. I got kids like you got kids, brother, and they are related. Alright, whanaunga. Alright, whānau. Kia ora. Alright, nō reira. I love yous. Tūturu, whakamoa, kia tina, haumie, hui, taiki. And in the movie, like I say things like, Maniapoto, you should be the king, Keith, because it's the Maniapoto, even all the Maori tribes chose the king to come from the Maniapoto. That's why I'm picking on you. You know what I mean? And fucking, you're just an innocent man like all of us. And so, yeah, the first king was from the Maniapoto, and then we got Rewi Maniapoto, and we got Tawhiao, and some of the greatest fucking minds on the planet ever. I'm Denisovan, brother. I was here, my family was here, when your family was here before there were Māori. Way before. They say majority of people on the planet have Denisovan facial features. The red hair comes from Denisovan. All the Polynesians come from Denisovan. We're all African. We all got an African greatest grandmother, but I'm Denisovan too. So, and I'm from this part of the earth, my Denisovan blood. So I'm a kaitiaki too. I'm fucking here to protect, and these are my kids, bro. These are my kids, and our hormones been fucked with, man. All the stats show that. I need your help, brother. I need your help. Alright, whānau. Let's go be the king, brother. Be the king. Oh, fucking, sorry, whānau. One more fucking thing. Everything I'm saying, this is my opinion, based on what I've seen. And I actually went and seen some different things, not just what's from the bros advertising money. So, fuck, what am I trying to say? Oh yeah, I'm not incriminating anyone else on here, their views and that. That's nothing, because I can just see the future. I'm going to get locked up, whānau, for not being vaccinated. They're going to put me in some sort of fucking place where they put all the artists who've decided not to, all the freedom fighters and people who think for themselves, and they're going to put us all in some sort of camp. And so I just want to make sure that the fucking AI or the computer, or the policeman or the American policeman or whoever, some Filipino person working for the police, when they're tracking me down, I just want you to know it was just me by myself, just trying to save my fucking kids, man.
Well, we've finished and the judges adjourned his decision. It was great having a judge that was really interested in the issues, and the judge actually said he really enjoyed the case afterwards, so I think we've given him a huge amount to think about. Very different between the minister's view about what's important and what needed to be done and our view about what needed to be done. And I mean, we're saying that the minister's got responsibilities to weigh up a lot of factors because of the Bill of Rights, the obvious interference with the freedom to choose to decline medical treatment. And if the Crown is trying to force you to have medical treatment, it's really important that there's a good consideration of why, and because the law says it must be demonstrably justified. So, yeah, some really, really important issues. It's about as important as it gets, actually, because our fundamental human rights, the argument is that they belong to us, not even to the government at all. The government's got no right to interfere, my body, my choice, and that's our starting point. But if there is any right for the government to interfere, it must be demonstrably justified, it must be reasonable, it must be proportionate. And we say that they've failed to do all of that. So at least we've got the issues on the table. We've got a lot of the information about the risks of the vaccine on the table. We've got a lot of the issues about the uncertainties about how effective the vaccine is, including on transmission and particularly of the Delta variant, because as it turned out, nobody's got any evidence to show that it prevents transmission of the Delta variant. And we've also raised the issue, well, actually, they thought COVID was very bad at the start, but the evidence now is around 0.15% death rate, which is not that different from the flu. So why are we treating this so severely compared to the flu? So the argument, everything's just completely out of proportion with the government response compared to the reality. And it seems that the minister's been operating under this illusion that COVID is, the vaccine is safe and effective. And he says that in his evidence, we're so confident it's safe and effective. But in actual fact, the evidence that he says he's relying on doesn't say what he wants it to say. So, a bit of selective hearing going on, really. So, I don't know what the judge is going to decide. He's promised to give us a speedy decision, which is great. And what was the most amazing thing of all is while we're in there arguing about the rationality and reasonableness of what the judge, what Parliament has done and what the minister's done over the last few months, they're over here passing more extreme pronouncements. What was the most amazing thing of all is while we're in there arguing about the rationality and reasonableness of what the judge, what Parliament has done and what the minister's done over the last few months, they're over here passing more extreme pronouncements that go way beyond where we were, and based on the evidence that we've been hearing in court today, including the Ministry of Health's own expert evidence.
If Monica Lewinsky says that while you were in the Oval Office area you touched her breast, would she be lying?
Let me say something about all this.
The purchase of is it Wu-Tang Clan? Is that the name of the album? Name of the group?
On the advice of counsel, I invoke my Fifth Amendment privilege against self-incrimination and respectfully decline to answer your question.
Nonverbal behavior that could indicate deception are changes in body movements and actions on the part of the interviewee.
The subconscious form of that is when you're hiding your emotions from yourself. You're not even aware of them, but your face reveals them. So as I said, the smirk is a combination of happiness and contempt, and it's seen in that sideways smile on one side only. So what does contempt mean, and how does this relate to an abuser? So according to the dictionary, the definition of contempt is the act of despising or a lack of respect and reverence. It's willful disobedience or open disrespect. This can also come from a terminology they use in law, which is something like contempt of the court. When someone is being outright disrespectful in the courtroom, they'll actually use that terminology. It also means feeling that someone or something is not worthy of respect or approval. It is disapproval and disgust, that combination. And it can also be used to indicate an extreme lack of respect, or an intense dislike.
Well, good morning and welcome to the second day of the Global Vaccine Summit. We are much closer today to achieving the goal of universal coverage. Today, we'll have experts sitting down and talking about what it takes to solve this problem, You'll hear some very exciting new commitments to this fight. You'll see new partnerships that are working together and solve the very tough problems that we have in the final stages. I think today will go down in the history of global health. It's a very important day, right up there with the time that UNICEF first committed to universal vaccination, right up there with the original creation of the Global Alliance for Vaccines, challenge each other's ideas and assumptions and use our combined understanding and energy to generate the new ideas and partnerships that'll achieve our goal. It's within our power to create a better future for children through the power of our collaboration. As we make the world healthier, is the population going to get so big that feeding everybody and maintaining the environment is going to be impossible? Here we can see a chart that looks at the total world population over the last several hundred years. And at first glance, this is a bit scary. We go from less than 1 billion in 1800, and then 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7.4 billion where we are today is happening even faster. So Melinda and I wondered whether providing new medicines and keeping children alive, would that create more of a population problem? What we found out is that as health improves, families choose to have less children. And this effect is very, very dramatic. We find that in every country of the world, this is repeated. The population growth goes down as we improve health. So we've taken that chart that shows the global population growth, and we've actually extended it out all the way to 2100. And we can see that instead of continuing, it actually flattens out. Another way to see that is through this rate of population growth. And you can see that in the 60s, that reached a pretty high number, over 2% per year, and it's now come way, way down. Now, 11 billion people, still a lot, but the good news is that the faster we improve health, the faster family size goes down. But the good news is that the faster we improve health, the faster family size goes down. And so we can feel great about saving those lives, Let's have the conversation begin. Thank you.
Can you guys get fucking hard-ons yet? Still? You get fucking hard-ons with your fucking jabs? Only the women. Because I can still fucking get a hard-on every morning. I'll tell you that right now.
Good stuff, mate.
One of your wives got a fact you can't get a hard-on. When you can't get her pregnant. Well, she can't get pregnant.
That's happened, man. That's the blockades happen, man. Stillborns and that.
Is that what's going on? When your daughter can't produce eggs. When she can't produce eggs, you don't fucking have grandchildren. Duh! You fucking thick. When your daughter can't produce eggs. When she can't produce eggs, you don't fucking have grandchildren. Duh! You fucking thick.
Awesome, brother.
Better women's stories. Protecting what the fuck is wrong with you? Stop killing our kids. They're GPSing us where we are. We're all going to fucking camps, are we? We're all going to fucking camps, are we? Is that where we're fucking going? Camps? Cunts! You're going to put us in camps?
Oh, camps. Sure, brother.
What's going on?
The camps are like being made in there between balls and shit. Harvesting. Quarantine accommodation, they call it.
Fucking mutant police force, that's what you are.
Good afternoon, everyone. We are now a matter of hours away from an unprecedented lockdown of our country in order to combat an unprecedented virus that, left unchecked, would have an unacceptable toll on New Zealanders.
New Zealand had a pandemic plan and it was designed around the flu.
It became apparent that if we followed the steps in our pandemic plan, we would go down the track of other countries and not being able to manage the outbreak in our communities. So we had to change tack.
Our plan is simple. We can stop the spread by staying at home and reducing contact.
All across the country, stores are emptying and so are the streets as New Zealand gets ready for the lockdown.
Non-essential businesses in New Zealand must now close. All bars, restaurants, cafes, cinemas, pools, playgrounds.
Were we overreacting? Some people said we were. And certainly when the scientists say shut the borders and lock down the country, that's quite a hard scenario to justify. We'd predicted that after we locked down, the cases would continue to go up.
There are 40 new confirmed cases. There are 50 new, there are 78, there are 85 new cases of COVID-19 in New Zealand.
We all held our breath as we saw the numbers start to level out and realised that the lockdown was probably working.
The WHO guidance on how to respond effectively to the pandemic was really clear. The core public health measures of testing, contact tracing, isolation of cases and close contacts were fundamental to being able to break the chain of transmission in our community. We had already established our testing capacity and we continued to increase that and started to test more widely.
More people have recovered from COVID-19 than have caught it. More people have recovered from COVID-19 than have caught it.
Pleased to report that today there are no new cases of COVID-19 in New Zealand. Good news, our 13th consecutive day of no new cases. A really core part of our success in this was the coherence and comprehensiveness of our communication campaign.
I'm speaking directly to all New Zealanders today to give you as much certainty and clarity as we can as we fight COVID-19.
It was really important to have very clear and consistent messaging.
This is a COVID-19 announcement.
That helped the population to understand the why and also what was expected of them. New Zealand got to a point we had 24 days without a new case, and we effectively have been able to open up most of the economy, but with still very stringent border measures.
What's your
immediate reaction when you heard there were no active cases of COVID-19 remaining in New Zealand?
I did a little dance.
We are really only at the end of the beginning, and we need to make sure we remain vigilant and don't undo all the good work we've done over the last few months.
And so while the job is not done, there is no denying this is a milestone. So can I finish with a very simple thank you, New Zealand.
The world is rapidly changing. It is home to 800 million more people than a decade ago. More people live in cities and travel than ever before. With many new partners working on global health, political leaders are realizing that health is essential for people and countries to reach their full potential. Whether it's rapid response to an epidemic, WHO stands as the guardian of health.
You should stay home for the people that you even if you're fine, even if you know you're going to be okay, there's certain people that will not be okay because of your actions. They might get exposed to this thing that we don't have a vaccine for, we don't have universally accepted treatment for, and that we need to. There's two arguments, right? The one argument is we need to keep going, protect the weak, protect the sick, but let's open up the economy. The other argument is stop placing money over human lives, and let's shelter in place until we come up with some sort of a decision, and let's figure out some way to develop some sort of a universal basic income plan or something like that to feed people during this time while we make this transition.
I think there's as I said, my opinion is if somebody wants to stay home, they should stay home. If somebody doesn't want to stay home, they should not be compelled to stay home. That's my opinion.
Do you think
if somebody doesn't like that, well, that's my opinion. This notion, though, that you can just sort of send checks out to everybody and things will be fine is not true. Obviously, there's some people have this absurd view that the economy is like some magic horn of plenty. Like it just makes stuff, whatever. There's a magic horn of plenty, and the goods and services, they just come from this magic horn of plenty. And then if somebody has more stuff than somebody else, it's because they took more from this magic horn of plenty. Now let me just break it to you, the fools out there. If you don't make stuff, there's no stuff. Yeah. So if you don't make the food, if you don't process the food, you don't transport the food, and whether medical treatment, getting your teeth fixed, there's no stuff. I would become detached from reality. You can't just legislate money and solve these things. If you don't make stuff, there is no stuff. Obviously, we'll run out of the stores. We'll run out of the the machine just grinds to a halt.
It's designed to be safe. It's quiet and totally predictable, down to the cost savings. Nothing similar to what you've seen from us before. In fact, it's impossible to drive.
This is Vera, an autonomous vehicle. Vera is part of a larger system and has the potential to optimize transports in highly repetitive, short-distance transport flows with large volumes of goods, such as ports, factory areas and logistic megacenters, offering better delivery precision and flexibility. The autonomous electric vehicles operate together in a network and are connected through a cloud-based service and management center.
There will be fewer and fewer jobs that a robot cannot do better. Okay. What to do about mass unemployment? This is going to be a massive social challenge. And I think ultimately we will have to have some kind of universal basic income. I don't think we're going to have a choice.
Universal basic income.
Universal basic income. I think it's going to be necessary.
Why it is that the noble objectives which have animated the growth of the welfare state have produced results that disappoint almost everybody.
People who get on welfare lose their human independence and feeling of dignity. They become subject to the dictates and whims of their welfare supervisor, who can tell them whether they can live here or there, whether they may put in a telephone, what they may do with their lives. They're treated like children, not like responsible adults. And they're trapped in the system. And they're trapped in the system. And as a result, this becomes a self-perpetuating cycle, rather than simply a temporary state of affairs.
Do you also support a UBI, the Universal Basic Income?
I do, but that is not where we are. I think that is a very correct idea. In other words, what that essentially says is that no family, I think it's Finland that's beginning to move in that direction, is that right?
Yeah, I think
also
it's Finland,
and
yes.
I absolutely support, but right now where we are, I mean, that's kind of a step too far right now for the United States.
We should explore ideas like universal basic income.
We will have to have some kind of universal basic income.
Basic minimum earnings for everybody.
Or universal basic income, you like that?
100% think that's really important.
We're going to have to consider new ways of thinking about these problems, like a universal income.
Universal basic income. The concept is simple: giving money to people every month without strings attached and at taxpayers' expense.
Our generation is going to have to deal with tens of millions of jobs replaced by automation.
Proponents of the program hope it can reduce income inequality and soften the blow for those like truckers who could soon lose their job due to automation. They also argue that UBI could replace or supplement other more selective forms of welfare.
Well, people are working hard. They're working very hard. They're working 1, 2, and sometimes 3 jobs. They're working until there's nothing left.
Maniapoto is a Chicago alderman who's proposing a UBI pilot program for the city.
No one is leaving their job for $500 a month. When we hand over tax incentives to big corporations or we give tax cuts to rich people, the assumption is that they're going to spend the money in the economy and it's going to circulate around, right? So rich people do the right thing, but if we help poor people or people who are struggling with a little bit of cash so that they can make decisions about how to provide for themselves, somehow we're going to believe they're going to go out and buy champagne.
So it means that unemployed people will be paid across the globe.
Yeah.
Because there is no job, machine, robot is taking over.
That's simply and I want to be clear that these are not things that I think that I wish would happen. These are simply things that I think probably will happen. If my assessment is correct and they probably will happen, then we need to say, what are we going to do about it? And I think some kind of a universal basic income is going to be necessary. The output of goods and services will be extremely high. So with automation, there will come abundance. There will be almost everything will get very cheap. I think I think we'll just end up doing a universal basic income. It's going to be necessary. The harder challenge, much harder challenge, is how do people then have meaning? Like a lot of people, they derive their meaning from their employment. So if you don't have, if you're not needed, if there's not a need for your labor, if you're not needed, if there's not a need for your labor, how do you, what's the meaning? Do you have meaning? Do you feel useless? That's a much harder problem to deal with.
If you think you are tired of your everyday mundane works, then let the robots take over your job. So having said that, in today's video, get ready to witness the most amazing smart factory automation, industrial manufacturing and high-tech production with intelligent robots taking over most of the tasks.
Every now and then, an industry goes through a technology disruption. With surgery, that's come with the introduction of robotics. At Intuitive, we continue to push the envelope to make surgery better.
I've been working in robotics for the last 27 years.
So we decided to change a lot our manufacturing system to robot.
Hapu, he says, in the past few years, used robotics to reduce its factory workforce from 2,500 people to now 1,000, and more automation is on the way.
One company has designed robots that can be used to make electronic components and biotech products more efficiently.
For decades, human beings have played games against computers. At first, computers struggled, but then they started winning.
Watson, what is greed? Yes.
And now they've become so dominant that they're raising doubts about the future of humanity. The latest emblem for existential dread is Google's DeepMind project, which created AlphaGo, an AI program that's become unbeatable at the most complex strategy game on the planet. While the game of checkers has 10 to the power of 20 possible outcomes, and a game of chess has 10 to the power of 40 possible outcomes, Go has more than 10 to the power of 80 possible outcomes. AlphaGo is trained to analyze situations itself by breaking the game down into tiny parts and visualizing all possible moves. Last week, it played the world's best Go player, 19-year-old Kerjia, with the help of a human handler. AlphaGo beat him 3 times, and after doing what it was designed to do, retired from the game.
在这次比赛完之后，在他继续又不停的进步之后，我觉得他对我而言就是100%。
If a system like AlphaGo can learn all the moves in Go well enough to beat a person, then it has the potential to replace lawyers and accountants, among dozens of other jobs. It might be perfect, but it has no way to navigate human politics. The Chinese government banned the live stream after Zhe lost the first game. The loss to an American company was an attack on the country's pride.
The Chinese government has made a big effort to proclaim that they are moving ahead rapidly in artificial intelligence, that they will be the people who dominate AI. To have the dreaded Google come in and beat China at its own game, it's just piling insult on top of insult. It's kind of amazing.
But it was more than a national crisis.
对我而言就是对围棋的上帝。阿尔法狗出现之后，可能真的我对人生啊，包括不是仅是围棋啊，对人生啊也有巨大的一个改变和看法。
COVID-19.
It's like nothing we've ever faced.
I'm no expert, but this is a big deal.
The virus is all up in our faces now.
Things could get tough.
Our humanity will be tested.
Whānau, we have work to do. COVID-19, you dick.
We need to set a target and go for it.
Work hard, smash it.
We must act.
Every single one of us.
Unite.
Everyone needs to dig deep.
We must be calm now.
Be kind.
And be patient.
Don't panic.
Don't be an egg.
Listen to the expert. Listen to the experts.
When you're asked to do something, do it. Please, please.
Unless you're being asked to buy all the toilet paper, don't do that. You don't need to buy all the toilet paper.
A bit of aroha goes a long way.
Let's all unite against COVID-19. Let's all unite against COVID-19.
Together, united, all of us.
We got this.
So stay in, stay well, and keep your distance. Especially from ghosts.
And don't be the one to pass it on. I think that's 2 metres.
A bit more.
Talking about common good, Wuhan virus vaccines are supposed to be a global public good. But what happens when a vaccine manufacturer starts bullying? Governments are silenced, supplies are halted, and profits take precedence over saving lives. I'm not describing a hypothetical situation here. I am describing what Pfizer is doing. The American pharma giant, it is doing all of this. It is bullying countries to submit to its demands. We first reported about this back in February this year. While countries like India are sending free vaccines to poorer nations, there are companies like Pfizer which are bullying governments. Pfizer asked to be compensated for the cost of any future lawsuits. Pfizer wanted Argentina to put, and listen to this, put its bank reserves, its military bases, and its embassy buildings at stake as collateral. Put its bank reserves, its military bases, and its embassy buildings at stake as collateral. These are Pfizer's demands. Look at this. Number one, Brazil waives the sovereignty of its assets abroad in favor of Pfizer. That the rules of the land be not applied on Pfizer. Number three, that Brazil take into consideration a delay in delivery. Number four, that Pfizer is not penalized for a delay in delivery. And number five, in case of any side effects, Pfizer be exempted from all civil liability. In case of any side effects, Pfizer be exempted from all civil liability.
Both Mr. Tamaki and Mr. Thompson are charged with intentionally failing to comply with a COVID-19 order by attending a gathering in an outdoor place in alert level 3 in Auckland, and by intentionally failing to comply with a COVID-19 order by organising a gathering in an outdoor place in an alert level. Accordingly, the matter will have to proceed to a judge-alone trial in that respect. They are to observe all and any current COVID-19 alert level requirement, and they are not to access or use the internet for the purpose of organising, attending or encouraging non-compliance, and they are not to access or use the internet for the purpose of organising, attending or encouraging non-compliance with the COVID-19 Public Health Response Act 2020 or any orders made pursuant to that Act, as that will simply be a scheduling appearance. Their attendance on that occasion is excused, provided they're represented by counsel.
What does it say to every Aucklander who has given up a huge amount over the past few weeks to do the right thing and keep other Aucklanders safe? It was a slap in the face to them.
Omicron, the new COVID variant sweeping the world, has arrived in New Zealand. The case is at the Sudima Managed Isolation Facility in Christchurch. The ominous news comes the day New Zealand achieved the target of 90% fully vaccinated, and MedSafe approved 5 to 11-year-olds receiving a mini dose of the Pfizer vaccine.
And number five, in case of any side effects, Pfizer be exempted from all civil liability.
Juliet Speedy begins our coverage with the latest on the Omicron case and the possible return of lockdown.
We were just getting used to living with Delta, and in walks Omicron.
We've identified our first case of the Omicron variant in New Zealand.
Omicron is spreading at an unprecedented rate, according to the World Health Organization, with cases doubling every 2 to 3 days. The symptoms are milder, and while early studies show vaccines may be less effective against the variant, there are promising signs that booster shots will bolster protection.
It was inevitable that we'd get a case at the border sooner or later.
Bloomfield says authorities are intent on keeping Omicron out of the community, but if it did spread, the dreaded lockdown could be back. And the Director General of Health insists the risk of spread right now is very low.
The key point, and I just want to emphasise this again, is this person is in managed isolation, as are all the close contacts who were on the flight. So this is not a case that's out in the community.
Insisting everything's going to be all right. Today, anyway.
So, Juliet, what role will vaccine boosters play in protecting the public from this new variant?
Well, Melissa, Ashley Bloomfield said today that rapidly emerging data shows that 2 doses of Pfizer is around 40% effective against symptomatic COVID, but a third booster shot bolsters that right up to between 80 and 90%, which he says is good news because it shows it is a good vaccine. But the question now is whether to shorten the time frame between those first 2 doses and that booster shot. Currently it's 6 months. Tomorrow, government ministers will meet to discuss whether to shorten that based on advice from the Ministry of Health. According to the World Health Organization,
the population growth goes down as we improve health.
To hopefully better protect the community against this new variant, and also to hopefully better protect the community against any more of those dreaded lockdowns.
The population growth goes down as we improve health.
According to the World Health Organization,
There's now twice as many Omicron cases being managed here as there was a day ago, and that number's only expected to rise. There are just 39 new COVID cases today, but before we all get too excited, that's partially due to a change in the way the ministry reports the numbers. There are 4 new cases of the Omicron variant, bringing the total to 8. They're all in international arrivals and all still in MIQ. The doubling in Omicron cases here comes amid surges of the variant and tightening of restrictions across Britain, France and Norway.
This is a small price to pay for your freedoms.
Half a world away, a raft of restrictions scrambled into place as COVID cases surge once again. The UK hitting a record number of cases 3 days in a row. 93,000 infections yesterday, up 40% on last week. Britons warned to stay home if they want to spend Christmas with loved ones.
Don't risk that by going out before then and possibly catching COVID. Because the reality is, if you are mixing with others just now, getting this virus is a real and increasing risk.
Oh, yeah. That's who I am. Talking about he waka puta. Yeah, waka puta. That's what I'm here for today. That's who I am.
What do you do for a job, and what are they trying to do to you in your work?
I'm a cattle truck driver. I'm a whisperer. They call me. All the farmers, they love me. My boss wants to keep me, but they want to mandate me. I don't want to be vaccinated. Too many of our people rolling over and dying, or getting crippled, or whatever. Genetics will tell you it's humanity and filthy rich people who are just making up these diseases because this is not a good thing. We're poisoning our own well, but it's the rich getting more greedy.
Sure, what do you think about them trying to vaccinate our children?
I think that's gnarly. That's nasty. How about I come in your house and tell you what to do? You don't tell me what to do. I'm sovereignty. You don't tell me what to do. I'm sovereignty. I'm from the dirt.
Yeah, brother. Fuck you.
I live under the dirt, so all you ratepayers think you own the house, you're actually leasing it and giving it back to sovereignty, then Crown, and that's the problem. Return all Crown land, government. Return all Crown land, government. I'm the mokopuna.
Yes. What's a better way for us to live?
What's a better way to live? Well, we live in a two-faced world. That's the diplomacy of being Māori. We live in a two-faced world. That's the diplomacy of being Māori, but we live in two worlds. The Wairua world and the real world, which is structured, like plastic.
You say you ain't talking shit. You say you ain't eating shit. But when we got to the bottom of it, you got shit on your fucking lips. Aotearoa, this a stick up. Just tell the world to shut the fuck up. What's the fucking hold up? The people want the sound that the birds had locked up. We were rotting in the cages. They were stealing our pages. I shouldn't have to say this, but it's fucking outrageous. If you open your eyes and turn around and watch their knives fall to the ground. No one got a sound just quite like this. Fuck the world, got no consequences. Ask me what the secret is. No one got a sound just quite like this. Fuck the world, got no consequences. Ask me what the secret is.
When it comes to views of Indigenous rights and Indigenous peoples, those views must be from those Indigenous peoples for the Indigenous rights of our people. That can't be determined by people who are not Indigenous. That can't be determined by people who are not Indigenous. So what I'm asking e hikama to this House, tēnā koe te pirimea, is that if we find this attitude acceptable in this House, the constant barrage of insults to tangata whenua, then I find this House in disrepute. And
order. The member's mic's off, so he will resume his seat. Order. The member will now leave the chamber.
When Carmore High School student Mia Dunn took her own life at just 14 years old, her family not only lost their loving daughter, she also became part of an alarming statistic. A recent report found 60% of people aged 10 to 14 who killed themselves between 2012 and 2016 were Māori. And the trend continues. Last year there was yet another spate of youth suicides in Whangarei, and a Gisborne-based community organisation says last year was their worst ever for Māori suicides there. Te Manu Korehi report that Te Aniwa Huri Hanganui has more.
Mia Dunn from Whangarei took her own life in 2012, just 2 weeks after her boyfriend Colin had also committed suicide. They were both 14 years old. Her dad, Brendan Dunn, says Mia was a quiet girl, but grounded and strong. He says she was just an ordinary teenager.
She seemed to have to be a little bit wiser than her peers, I don't know, she just, maybe because she was just so quiet and didn't really talk as much as the others, and she was into sports, netball and all that, music, and she's one of those girls who loves doing her hair and straightening her hair, and she was just an all-round really nice girl, I don't ever remember hearing a swear word coming out of her mouth, to be honest.
Mr Dunn says he never suspected his daughter would take her own life. He says not enough young people know where or how to get help when they need it.
They isolate themselves in their own minds. They just don't know where to go. And if they do know where to go, I think they feel ashamed or embarrassed or undervalued. We need to educate the adults on how to approach children and approach teenagers with a bit more empathy maybe in their time and age. I think we need more understanding about what our teenagers are going through in this era.
A report by the Child and Youth Mortality Review Committee found 20 Māori youths aged between 10 and 14 took their own lives from 2012 to 2016. Ngāti for Life Trust Suicide Support Group in Gisborne deals with predominantly Māori whānau. Manager Tuta Ngarimu says Māori youth suicide in the community is at an unprecedented rate.
We had a bad year last year. In one part there we were losing one every 2 weeks. Our worst weekend was we had a mother, a father, their 14-year-old daughter, 2 15-year-old girls. We had them all on suicide watch over that weekend, so that means we had someone with them 24/7.
Mr Ngarimu says many parents who have lost their kids to suicide struggled to talk to them about their issues.
Though they loved their kids, the more they tried to talk to their kids themselves, the more their kids closed them down. So they thought the next best thing was, I've got to just step back and give them their space. I think it's that crucial time there when you decide to step back, you seriously need to think about who can jump in that space.
Māori tend to be younger when they commit suicide compared to their Pākehā counterparts. Māori suicide deaths peak between 16 to 20 years old. For New Zealand Europeans, the peak is at 20. Hayley Grace Hollis from Gisborne lost her 4 siblings, Shane, Anahira, Fianza and LJ, to suicide in the last 10 years.
Our brother, he was only 18. And then 8 months later we lost our sister and she was 19. And then in 2015 we lost another brother and he was just shy of his 30th birthday. 9 months later, we lost another sister. Just had her 21st birthday.
Hayley wrote a song after her second brother took his life in 2015. She wanted her family and friends to never feel alone again. One of her brothers had sought help before his death, but she says it wasn't enough.
He was part of the mental health system, but unfortunately that was not really any help, and I don't think he got the help that he needed. He was just provided pills. I know it works in some cases, but in most, to me, it doesn't. The pills ain't the way, and for his case, that wasn't the way either.
Following the 4 deaths, her whānau meet once every 2 weeks to reconnect and talk about life.
We have at least 2 hours together of bonding time and learning waiata from where we come from. It also gives us time to just talk to each other and see how everyone's been, and yeah, we're sort of making time for each other now, and it has brought us more closer together.
Brendan Dunn says it's important parents ensure their kids feel valued.
Connect with your kids, not over Facebook. Turn your devices off and go out and go for a hike, smell the air, go to the beach, to other Māori families, to other fathers and that. Lead by example. Give up the drugs, give up the alcohol, better yourself for your kids and connect with them, make them feel valued.
There have been fiery scenes at Parliament as the Māori Party co-leader was kicked out, accusing Judith Collins of Māori bashing. But the National Party leader insists she's just doing her job. Here's political reporter Benedict Collins.
The Māori Party had heard enough.
Order. The member will now leave the chamber.
It was this question line around separate systems for Māori that sparked it.
Does she in any way accept the view in He Puapua that New Zealand has 2 spheres of governance?
It is 2021.
That's right.
You know, in my view, Mr. Speaker, I think New Zealand generally accepts that we have a relationship between the Crown and Māori.
Can you please give your view on whether the Leader of the Opposition's continued attack on Māori is racist?
Continuing outside the House.
The Opposition Leader has been constantly bashing Māori.
The Māori Party not alone.
So this isn't just about us, this is the nation. We've got a lot of our whānau calling for this behaviour to stop.
Yeah, we talk about unconscious bias, but what we're seeing here is very conscious bias. They are targeting Māori.
The Māori Party, though, they say they're upset by your questions, and they say that you're upsetting Māori around the country as well with your questions. What's your response to that?
Well, the Prime Minister needs to answer my questions. This is what Parliament is about. It's asking questions. The role of the opposition is not to not ask questions. There's clearly major changes going on, and New Zealanders have the right to know.
National believes the government is holding secret conversations with Māori around ownership, governance and joint sovereignty, and it's only right to question that.
That's what I'm here to do. I'm the Leader of the Opposition. I'm not going to have my head patted and be told to sit down and be a good little girl.
But it's not shutting down the National Party, it's shutting down racist rhetoric.
It's rhetoric and propaganda.
You can't be part of the conversation if you walk out.
Meanwhile, the debate continued back inside the chamber.
Working in partnership with Māori is not, never was and never will be apartheid.
National, though, clearly getting traction on the matter. Benedict Collins, One News.
If a wrong was done, people were, brought to account. They were punished for what they did. They were expected to pay compensation of some kind, utu. And the whole purpose of that was to return the community to a place of peace and balance. numbers in the prisons went up from the 1990s at the same time that the crime rate was coming down. And we have never been able to reconcile those two things and to realise that actually when people leave prison, about 70% of them reoffend within 12 months. And so that prison is actually a cause of crime in New Zealand. Prison is actually a cause of crime in New Zealand. It doesn't have any rehabilitative benefits, and it ensures that people are more likely to reoffend when they leave. The government of the day brought in the Bail Amendment Act, which made it very difficult for Maori to be bailed, and they ended up in the remand prisons. What happens when a young Maori who's never been to prison before goes into remand? The first day they get the bash, and they have all their property taken from them. The second day they are invited to join a gang. If they refuse, they give them the bash again. And the numbers have escalated. The prisons became a major recruiting ground.
This is the Visits Lounge. It's been refurbished, and this was done about a couple of years ago. The Wahine have kept it pristine. The thing about women and why we advocate for women here at Christchurch Women's Prison is they born our babies. So, you know, if we get it right with our women, we'll get it right for our sons and our daughters going forward.
I've seen a movement in the last couple of years towards a different way of doing prison. I mean, ideally, people would want to abolish them. Ideally, people would want to abolish them, but that's never going to happen.
I'm the Regional Commissioner for the South Island. I oversee the 5 prisons and community corrections that we've got.
Whoa, big job.
Yeah, there's always plenty going on, yeah. We launched Hokarangi as a way of altering our philosophy and making sure that everything we did had a strong basis in Te Ao Māori worldview, and that we were really focused on partnership, humanising and healing, and trying to deliver a more whānau-based service.
It's still maintaining control of the process. Now, what we want to see is a Māori-led, tikanga Māori process which is based on Māori thinking. And while it might be made available for Pākehā, it's actually focused on Māori and Māori beliefs. So it's not about saying, we will do this for you, it's you will do it for yourselves.
I'm not Māori, and my face doesn't represent the main demographic we have in prison, so I understand what we're trying to achieve, and I believe in it. We're trying to go to the marae, go to mana whenua, saying, look, we clearly don't have all the answers here, so what would you like to do? Many of these men, and there are normally 20 maximum at any one time, are some of the people that have had the biggest challenges and the most difficult to manage. They've often got high levels of violence in their background, and they'll have completed rehabilitative programs before they can even get into this unit.
I've been in and out of jail since the 90s, and I'm in my early 40s now, so I've been coming here since I was a teenager. So we're entering our kitchen and a couple of rooms here. So there's 4 males in this house.
You cook yourselves or what?
Yeah, so we cook ourselves, and we go shopping ourselves.
How determined are you that you won't be back in here?
I'm 100% determined that I'm not coming back here.
Maori whenua!
Are you going to be as strong as her? Will you be as strong as her? Come on, people!
Kia kino nei hoki! Kabate mateko! Kabate mateko! Tēnei te tangata! Huru! Huru! Pane! Pane! Fiti tēra! You can't Kabate, kabate, kōreko! Tēnei te tangata! Huru! Huru! Nāna ititi! Ai whakawhiti tēra! Pane! Pane! Kupane whiti tēra! Brother, you are Maori! You are Maori! You are Maori, brother! You are Maori, you can't do a haka, brother! Bro, I'm allowed to do a haka, that's not right. You can't bully me like that, bro. You can't bully me like that, bro. You know, you're a Kiwi, mate. Oh, fuck. I can do it. I'm allowed to. Come on, brother. They're doing a good job, but I'm allowed to do the haka. I'm allowed to do the haka. Let's do what you like. Exactly. It's not my country. Maoris can do what they want. It's not my country. It's not my country. Maoris can do what they want. It's not my country. It's not my country. Maoris can do what they want. It's not my country.
I'm one of the co-leaders for the One Party, which stood at last year's election, and so this year recently elected. Yeah, just here, I love children, and it's never just about us; it's about the next generation. And we know that as Māori, that interestingly enough, there's a lot of Māori people here, which says a lot to me about what we discern in our spirit about what's going on in our country. And yeah, all I can just say is, come on, whānau, it's never about us. We need to sort this out for the next generation. And these vaccine passports, the most hurtful thing for me today was, being rejected from coffee shops in our own country. It's tangata whenua, that's really offensive. And some people can't have these vaccines with the mRNA, so just do your homework and be compassionate to those who have chosen not to have the vaccine. Nō reira, kia ora koutou katoa.
Oh, thank you so much, because so much advertising was done on Māori, right?
Yeah.
But now that's like from this process, this process from the last process, there's way more Māori here, right?
Yeah, there's heaps, eh?
Ms. Gazan, seconded by Mr. Blakey, moves for leave to introduce a bill entitled An Act to Develop a National Framework for Guaranteed Livable Basic Income. This motion is deemed adopted. The Honourable Member for Winnipeg Centre.
Mr. Speaker, it is my honour to introduce the National Framework for a Guaranteed Livable Basic Income Act. I would like to start out by thanking the Member of Parliament for Elmwood Transcona for seconding my bill, my riding of Winnipeg Centre, Basic Income Canada Network, Basic Income Manitoba, Coalition Canada, Basic Income Canada Youth Network, Senator Kim Pate, former Senator Hugh Segal, and so many other anti-poverty activists across this country who contributed to the development of this bill. As we continue to find ways to make it through the pandemic, we know that those who were already left behind are even further behind. Mr. Speaker, this bill is in response to calls to implement a guaranteed livable basic income from Indigenous, territorial, provincial, and municipal jurisdictions who clearly recognize the need to modernize our social safety net. A JLBI is not a panacea, but a way forward to modernize our social safety net in addition to current and future government programs and supports. It will ensure that all people have the necessary supports and resources to live with dignity, security, respect, and human rights as affirmed in the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. I'd once again like to thank my constituents and the basic income movement for your support. This is a people's movement.
As many of you will know, some months ago, more than 84%
And they did the same to the Maniapoto people where they got 5,000 people, 5,000 people to sign their thing with the government, the settlement, that we should never have a settlement. He did that even though 40,000, 35,000 Maniapoto didn't even know it happened.
Of those of us who supported the signing of our treaty settlement. Since that time, that endorsement from all of you has been acknowledged by the Crown. So over the last few weeks, we have been working as a board to progress our treaty settlement. Early in the new year, there will be a hui to bring us all together to sign the relationship agreements with a number of Crown agencies, and for the Crown to present its apology for its actions over previous generations to all of us as a people. In the meantime, the board has also decided that we will look to sign the deed of settlement, and that we will sign that deed of settlement within the restrictions of the current COVID environment. And that we will sign that deed of settlement within the restrictions of the current COVID environment. That means that we're not able to gather and come together. So this signing will be conducted essentially on the papers, and that will mean that we can continue to progress our settlement, that we can establish post-settlement governance entity, Te Nehe Nehe Nui Trust, and we can get work underway to engage with all of you on a 5-year plan for the settlement, and we can start to put the infrastructure together around Te Nehe Nehe Nui Trust, our new tribal entity, and we can start the process to shut down the trust board. As soon as it is safe, we will all come together. We will meet with the Crown, we will conclude the settlement process, and we will look to set the new relationship between ourselves and the Crown.
So what is agreed is, because the railway line is there, the Crown will return the land to Maniapoto, and Maniapoto will gift it back to the Crown for the use of the railway line.
Hei tā te minita take triti he whakatika I ngā he o te krauna te mea nui ki aia.
If things had happened properly in history, that is actually the way things would have worked. It would have been by agreement, not by the Crown just taking it and taking more than was needed.
I would really like to see more investment into education.
Kia hoki mai ngā rawa katoa Maniapoto.
What I'd like to see come of the settlement is more support for our whānau, iwi, hapu and our marae.
Again, run by our own marae or our own iwi, where we're able to upskill people to go into jobs.
That we go in, that our settlement comes with a high degree of unification and working together, because it is for our younger generations.
Building a relationship for moving forward, so looking at what can they promise us that they will continue to do for our iwi, how are we going to sustain that and create places with that money for our people.
After the treaty was signed in 1840, more and more settlers began to arrive, and an 1852 constitution granted them their own government. Māori, however, were not able to participate in this settler government until the law changed in 1867. Even then, there were only 4 Māori seats in Parliament, at a time when, based on their population size, they should have had many more. Māori were alarmed in this shift in power from the governor to the settlers, a change that led to a deterioration in the treaty relationship. By the early 1860s, Māori had lost nearly all of the South Island and about 1/5 of the North. One of the Māori responses to the loss of the land was the formation of the KiNG movement, or kingitanga. This movement was essentially an attempt to control the rapidly expanding European settlement and to oppose land sales. In 1858, a number of chiefs placed their land under the mana of King Potatau, the first Maori king, as a guarantee against sale. Supporters of the Maori king did not see it as a challenge to the British Queen's authority, but a way to live together. The settler government, however, took a very different view. It believed there could never be two rival authorities in New Zealand, and it saw the kingitanga as a challenge to the Queen's sovereignty. Meanwhile, the land-hungry settlers were angry with any sort of opposition to land sales. There were calls for a decisive military action against the Waikato Tainui and the Mighty Maniapoto neighbours, which was where the kingitanga was based. And a confrontation was not long in coming. Governor Grey was determined to extend Queen Victoria's sovereignty over the whole of New Zealand, and in doing so, to break Māori resistance once and for all.
I feel proud to be standing here in front of this memorial stone to a great Maori chief, Mighty Maniapoto. He was a great leader, more or less a general, Maori general, as far as the Maori wars are concerned in the Waikato. These wars, of course, started from Rangiriri, then right to the Taranaki area, and then back here to the last Battle of Ōrākau. And the main idea as far as the fighting was concerned is the confiscation of Maori land. And of course, the great war cry originated ka whawhai tonu mātou ake tonuat.
I cried at that cemetery of Rewi Maniapoto because the strength was there, even though the King movement was there in force. And Whina Kupa, as we arrived, led Matakite, and I felt as if we'd just buried Rewi Maniapoto. And with the King people, the King movement there, doing all their sacred things, she turned round to the tomb, addressed this man, says, "Rise up, O noble sir, come with me in spirit, give me the strength. You said we will fight on forever and ever. We are doing this. These are your children. So take me and give me strength on this march." And when they put the cloaks around and put the flowers on the tomb, the people cried, young and old. And Rewi Maniapoto's grave, although I've been there all my life, knew about the man. He was a mighty name in history. Now I stop every time I go past. And it was on the Matakita March where I knew the wealth of the man. He became alive again. So this is what Matakita means by a spiritual march. It is the spiritual thing of the unseen power of the mana of their ancestors. Of the unseen power of the mana of their ancestors. And Rewi Maniapoto is this ancestor, and it says kaha, and this ake, I will fight on. That's been the strength of the march. And to me, that's the most wonderful experience I've ever had.
Tēnā koutou katoa. New Zealand is a small country, but we are not afraid to speak up for what is right. We're proudly multicultural, we stand up for Indigenous and minority rights, and the rights of children everywhere. And where we ourselves fall short in these areas, we are working to make change. Protecting and promoting human rights lies at the core of our identity. Lies at the core of our identity. Lies at the core of our identity. It's central to our efforts to build strong, inclusive societies. Now, our new International Human Rights Action Plan will strengthen our global voice in 4 areas: the rights of people with disabilities, the rights of women and girls, LGBTQI+ issues, and abolishing the death penalty.
1948 rings a bell? Oh yes, of course. It was in the last century, Grandma and Grandpa's generation. Back then, everyone was recovering from the Second World War and its 70 million dead, the most devastating conflict in human history. So in 1948, to make sure such atrocities would not happen again, the search for shared values began. Why? Have people unite around a strong symbol. Have people unite around a strong symbol.
Mein Führer, ich melde 52.000 Arbeitsmänner zum Appell angetreten. Heil, Arbeitsmänner! Heil, mein Führer! Warten! Immer! Warten! Ab!
Kamerad, woher stammst du?
Aus Friesenland!
Und du, Kamerad?
Aus Bayern!
Und du?
Vom Kaiserstuhl!
Und du?
Aus Pommern! Und aus Königsberg! Aus Schlesien!
We must act.
Every single one of us.
Unite. Everyone needs to dig deep.
We must be calm now.
Be kind.
And be patient.
Don't panic.
Don't be an egg.
Listen to the experts.
When you're asked to do something,
do it. Please.
Every dictator needs a philosopher. So as Adolf Hitler took power in 1930s Germany, he cast about for his own version of Joseph Stalin's Karl Marx. He settled on Friedrich Nietzsche, the German genius madman who had been dead since the turn of the century. This was not an intellectual flight of fancy, but a deliberate act of statecraft, according to Ronald Biener, a professor of political science at the University of Toronto, Mississauga. Nietzsche's writing about a future age of imperial politics in which a new caste would rule over Europe, recalling glorious empires of the past, was a blank check that Hitler was free to cash. And so in 1934, the new Führer was photographed at the Nietzsche archives in Weimar and gave Nietzsche's younger sister Elizabeth a wreath for his grave with the words, "To a great fighter." The next year, Hitler gave a set of Nietzsche's books to his ally, the Italian dictator Benito Mussolini. This was not the legacy he would have chosen. It would have caused Nietzsche great pain, Biener argues. He was opposed to racism, socialism, and nationalism, all of which the Nazis had to studiously ignore.
DC Comics were asking themselves what someone would be like who was physically far superior to all current human beings. Nietzsche is asking himself a very similar question, only he's interested in psychological qualities. In Thus Spake Zarathustra, Nietzsche points out that evolution cannot be assumed to have finished. Human beings have evolved from apes. But what is ape to man, he asks. In some respects, like imagination and science, we're obviously far superior to our ancestors. So how might people of the future be superior to who we are today? Nietzsche's character Zarathustra's task is to speculate about what the Superman, the more advanced person of tomorrow, will be like. Nietzsche wasn't interested in massively enhanced brain power, an ability to do hugely complex sums in one's head, or to learn a language in 3 days. Rather, he was developing a crucial thought experiment. Suppose we were psychologically superior to people today, what would we be actually like? What is the ideal kind of human being? And he came up with a very surprising and challenging answer. Nietzsche's strategy for answering his own question was to identify the person he most admired, the person he thought had the best approach to life, and then home in on the qualities that made this person the way they were. He was particularly impressed by Johann Wolfgang von Goethe, whom he regarded as the nearest anyone had yet come to being a Superman. He also took some hints from Napoleon, Montaigne, Voltaire, and Julius Caesar. He concluded that supermen are going to have some wonderful and sometimes unexpected characteristics. They will make their own values. They'll be very independently minded. They won't ask, what do other people admire, and follow along. They'll carve their own path. Supermen accept that they might need to hurt people in the name of great things. They can be selfish in strategic ways. Greatness for them will be about the reform of humanity towards pagan values, the values of Goethe. Supermen will never be resentful of the success of others. They'll accept suffering as a necessary component of good things. They'll understand that they're hard to understand, and that therefore they may often be lonely. They'll be gentle towards the weak, out of consciousness of their own great strength. They'll be a little bit wicked around sex, by conventional standards. They'll not be humble, but rather delight in their own abilities. They'll be interested in the practical application of culture to raise the mentality of society. Nietzsche thought we would be surprised and sometimes a bit shocked by his list. He thought we'd be expecting that the superhumans of tomorrow would be deeply compassionate, very egalitarian, uninterested in rivalry, and perhaps have ambitions to make breakthroughs in science. But Nietzsche was arguing something else, that maybe being great involves some qualities that are a bit disturbing, and also that greatness means being interested in the salvation of mankind through culture. The word Superman is useful for getting us to think about who we would like to evolve into. Each of us should, under Nietzsche's guidance, have a sense of what we would like to be if we could be the super version of ourselves. The idea of the Superman helps us to refine our own ambition.
The Universal Declaration of Human Rights. What is less known is that it was adopted by the UN General Assembly and has become the most translated text on Earth. But what are human rights? The rights you are entitled to simply because you are a human being. In other words, everyone benefits from them from birth, without exception or distinction. The idea behind it is that these rights are like needs. They are absolutely necessary to live well. Without them, it would be the law of the jungle, and you'd risk being beheaded if your government didn't like your Facebooks.
Like many countries formed under colonialism, Australia has a pretty horrible track record of mistreating its Indigenous people, the Aboriginals and Torres Strait Islanders, many of whom have become known as the Stolen Generation. Why do they call it the Stolen Generation?
Because it was a whole generation of kids that was taken from their homes. Basically, you either had to be black or white. You couldn't be brown or in the middle.
So they would consider you in the middle and you would have been
taken.
Not kidding. Up until 1970s, by law, any Indigenous child who looked like he or she had any amount of white ancestry in them could be snatched from their families and forcibly assimilated into white society.
My grandfather, my mum's father, he was part of the Stolen Generation. He was really young, taken out.
How old was he?
Maybe a year old when he was taken.
Oh, wow. So he never knew his real family.
He knew, because when he was taken from the front yard of where they lived.
Wait, what? He was in the front yard and somebody just pulled up and took him?
Yeah, policemen or rangers would come, pull up, just grab these half-coloured kids or coloured kids and then chuck them in the truck and then take them.
As a little boy was being forced into the back of a truck, his aunt, a young child herself, sacrificed her own freedom so he wouldn't be alone.
When she heard the commotion of him crying and screaming, she ran and voluntarily just jumped on.
Light-skinned children were often adopted by European families, while darker-skinned children, like Deanne's grandfather, were sent to missionary camps.
Most of the missions were based on islands, so they'd take you, send you away, let you grow up there in a mission and learn about, the Catholic side of it and a European way. You'd learn English and then...
Try to make you forget your family?
Yeah.
You never got to see them, or...?
Yeah, you never ever got to see them. There was no such thing as visiting hours. He spent the rest of it on the island until he was like 18, 19. When he came off, he knew...
18 or 19 years old and basically a prison.
Yeah, on an island.
Just for being born?
Yep, just for being born.
This is Ireland. This is England. On the surface, Irishmen and Englishmen look rather similar. Although Irish people are more likely to be redheads, it is well known that Irish people are not quite fond of the English people. Why? The complication between Irish and English people can be traced back to the ancient world, when the Celts inhabit both Britain and Ireland. Later, the Romans came along and promoted Jesus. The Romans came along and promoted Jesus. After the fall of Roman Empire, Anglo-Saxons from Germany came over to England, making England Germanic.
The patches usually feature a British bulldog wearing a German Stahlhelm, which supposedly is an image intended to offend, as it is a British bulldog wearing the helmet.
Making England Germanic. The Vikings visited for a while, screwing both islands. Later, William the Conqueror and his Norman buddies invaded England and bits of Ireland. Although the Normans claimed to control whole Ireland, in practice nobody gave a crap. In fact, the Irish lords became more and more powerful over time. Everything changed when Henry VIII appeared. He made England Protestant, because his dick wanted another side chick. Then, he invaded Ireland. Ireland was still Catholic whilst the English invaders were Protestants. Unsurprisingly, the Irish people revolted against the English often. To make Irish people more British and Protestant, the English government encouraged Protestant English and Scottish people to settle in Ireland, in what is known as plantations. These plantations created a dominant Protestant minority in Ireland. During the War of Three Kingdoms, Oliver Cromwell from England managed to screw Ireland big time. Irish Catholics were heavily discriminated. To ensure England monarchs remained Protestants, the English politicians decided to invite a Protestant Dutch dude to be the king. This glorious revolution for England was definitely not glorious at all for Ireland. Most Irish Catholics remained poor whilst their English and Scottish Protestant lords lived the high life. Eventually, Ireland formally joined the United Kingdom. Irish Catholics began to demand for equal rights. The Great Irish Famine reduced the population in Ireland by starvation and emigration. The poor response by the British government in relieving the Irish people made the Irish people become more and more nationalistic. The nationalistic sentiment spoiled into yet more rebellions. There was a clear divide in Ireland by the end of 19th century. Most of the island was poor, nationalist, Catholic and agrarian. The northeast was predominantly Unionist, Protestant, industrialized, and rich. The Unionist Protestants saw themselves more British than Irish. Long story short, this British-Irish identity divide sparked off the Easter Uprising, partition of Ireland, and the Troubles. The Good Friday Agreement largely calmed everyone's tits, as both sides decided not to kill each other anymore. Then, the English people decided to go Brexit, pissing off the Scottish and Northern Irish population. The whole Brexit drama gave rise to the possibility of a united Ireland.
The COVID-19 pandemic upended life as we know it, plunging many Europeans into crisis and uncertainty, for the present as well as the future. But with societies under strain, people of all ages learned in 2020 that solidarity and social support were more important than ever. We also saw a new kind of response from European governments. In many places, support schemes were simplified, improved and broadened. This was crucial to protect our health systems and avoid an explosion of poverty.
This is divide and conquer. We did not sign up for this. Hey, it's a trial vaccine. You're killing everybody. It's ridiculous. You already know this has been a hidden agenda for many years, many generations.
No, not really.
What do you think about England?
I don't like England. England.
Yeah, it's the big one next to us. Sounds like England. Not gonna name any names.
Do you have a country you hate?
England. America. Europe.
The neighbour?
Neighbour.
What about England?
We're here now. We're okay. No, they're actually alright. Like,
do you have a country you don't like?
No, I don't think life's that simple, but right now I don't want to visit America or the UK. So I don't like the way they run as countries.
You don't like England?
England's like very bad.
Very bad?
Yeah.
Why do you don't like it?
Because, they're just bad.
We never get what we vote for. We never get what we vote for.
For example, my brother getting stopped going on a run. Simply because he's running while brown and being stopped by police. Maori, Pacific and brown people of colour have also seen that same systemic racism every day, and the statistics and evidence support this.
Engari e whakapono ana ia kei ngā wāhi katoa a kaikiri e haere ana.
Chemists in particular, especially when I'm dressed as an ordinary citizen and not looking like an MP, as a brown woman in a chemist, you're more likely to get followed, and that's something I've been used to for a long time. But it's everywhere. It's not just the police, it's the entire justice system, criminal system. It's also an entire society. But that I'd like to be very clear to the police commissioner that this is still happening.
But as Constable Bruce Wilson's about to learn, it's getting more complex every day. He stops a car that looks in poor condition.
Oh yeah, how's it going? Good.
Bruce asks to see the driver's licence, but it's not a type he's expecting.
I'll go and talk to her. Have you got a New Zealand driver's licence, eh? No, I haven't. I've got the whole one. Okay. Yeah, well, I'll go and talk to my boss, eh? But as far as I know, it doesn't cut it, eh? Yes, it does, boss. They're recognised from the New Zealand Parliament. Just want to wait there for me, thanks? Basically, the vehicle we've pulled over, the driver has presented me with a Maori driver's licence. and the vehicle's registered under what's called a Maori Parliament. First time I've come across it, it's starting to get more and more common to have a driver's licence. It's quite legit looking, but it's under the Maori sovereignty government or something like that. So I'm just going to talk to the boss and see what happens from here, but I'm pretty sure it just doesn't cut it in the system.
But the driver's adamant that it's valid.
We are the Maori Parliament. We're allowed to issue Maori licences, Maori warrants, registrations. You can only act as a peace officer because we do not recognise their jurisdictions. By the end of the day, when our government secedes, he'll be working for us. So his job is on the line right now, but he doesn't know it.
Ko te whakapai a tēnei wahine, nā te prihimana ia I tūkino.
But there was nothing that I did or said to provoke the police into treating me the way that they did. The police have to understand that Māori are reluctant to engage with them, to talk to them, because even if it hasn't happened to them personally, someone in their whānau has got a story of being brutalised by the police.
Hei tāna, kua pāteringa kaha a te ture I ona whanaunga.
My siblings had been in trouble with the law, and they would tell me stories of police brutality and I never believed them. They would tell me stories of police brutality and I never believed them. I said, you've done something. Nobody just assaults you for nothing. And it wasn't until I experienced it.
E ai ki ngā pūrongo, he iti iho I te haurua o ngā whakapai mo ngā prihimana o Aotearoa, kaore anō kia tino whakatewhatewhahia. I te pipiri o tērā tau, ono te kaumatahi noi ho ngā whakapai I whaimana.
They denied and continued to deny that they had actually assaulted me.
E ai ki tēnei kairanga hau, kua piki ngata tauranga prihimana mo te tūkino Māori I roto I ngā tau e whā.
And what we can see from these police statistics is that in 2014, Māori were 7 times more likely than Pākehā to be made the victims of police violence. And in 2017, Māori are now 8 times more likely than Pākehā to be the victims of police violence.
3 police officers accused of manslaughter after a man died in a Hawera police cell have been found not guilty. The verdict was delivered just over an hour ago. Kate Nichol-Williams was there. Kate, take us through how this played out.
Well, there was surprise that the verdict was coming back today as the officers found out that they were not guilty one by one. There were cries from one side of the room instantly where the family of Alan Ball, the man who did died in the cell, were gathered. And on the other side of the room there were just sounds of utter relief, hugs and gasps where the family of the officers were.
Right now we're Americanising our police force in Māori communities apparently to keep us safe. But do you know who does not feel safe by police? It is Māori. Do you know how many Māori women I have spoken with who are in abusive relationships and they would rather not call the state because they are more worried about the abuse that they will experience if they phone the police or if they have to deal with the oranga tamariki. What does that mean if they were to lose their children? They would rather not go to the state because they're more scared of that than the fist of their partner that they have to deal with every day. That is a problem when the system becomes a perpetrator that our people cannot trust.
Julia Vaipoti, and we need to stress Julia is responding to figures that are pretty striking, and Julia is a lawyer, an advisor to Just Speak and a senior advisor to the Children's Commissioner, and boy oh boy there is something for us all to confront here and to acknowledge and respond to. Julia, we so appreciate you joining us this morning. Thank you so much
Kia
for your
ora,
time.
thank you.
Kia ora.
So powerful.
Whoa.
Yeah.
I just think if you take 2 kids, one is Māori and one is Pākehā, and neither of them have any prior record, and the Māori kid is 1.8 times more likely to be taken to the station, you find this pretty upsetting, aren't you?
I'm very hormonal, obviously, but it's really upsetting. It's so bad.
1.8 times more likely to be taken to the station and 7 times more likely to be charged once you're there. That is a staggering failure.
Well, new official figures show gangs are once again attracting new members, and the government's preparing to counter any criminal activity by adding 700 new police staff to the organised crime squad. There were 5,785 identified members and prospects in April, an increase of nearly 1,500 on 2 years ago, with much of the growth coming from the East Coast and Hawke's Bay.
There has been a lot of news and videos about the gangs of New Zealand recently, particularly the mongrel mob. People have been asking us about how and where did this gang originate, etc. So here is a bit of information and history on the mob. According to popular myth, around 1960, a Hastings magistrate described a group before him as nothing but a pack of mongrels. In one version, it was 2 Maori brothers being sentenced, and in another, it was a group of young Pākehā. The story is probably apocryphal. However, in the early 1960s, a group of mainly Pākehā boys from the Napier-Hastings area began calling themselves the Mongrels. By the early 1970s, they were wearing patches bearing the name Mongrel Mob and were Maori-dominated. In 2018, the Mongrel Mob was a collection of loosely affiliated, independent chapters with no national organization or president. New Zealand's largest gang, it had over 1,000 patched members and more than 30 chapters. Prisons were a major mob recruiting ground. In the late 1970s, a chapter was even formed in Auckland Maximum Security Prison. Insignia. Mongrel mob colors are predominantly red and black. The patches usually feature a British bulldog wearing a German Stahlhelm, which supposedly is an image intended to offend, as it is a British bulldog wearing the helmet. The patch is worn on the back of patched members, those considered loyal and trustworthy enough to be in the gang. The patch will also be tattooed on the member's body. Mob members are known for their tattooed faces and red bandanas. Mongrel mob members shout "Sieg Heil," bark like dogs, and use a mongrel mob salute, little finger and thumb up with middle fingers on palm. Membership. The gang claims it offers surrogate family for young men, most of whom are often alienated from their family via joining. A majority of members are from New Zealand's Maori, European, or other Polynesian ethnic groups, with Maori or part Maori predominating. A prospect is a person who is loyal to the gang but is not a patched member yet and must normally do errands or missions to show his loyalty to his gang. A prospect normally has a patched member to report or clock in to. This patched member normally decides when it is time for the prospect to be patched. The hierarchy is captain or president, vice president, sergeant-in-arms, patched members, prospects. In some cases, they use younger blood gangs as prospects. Mongrel Mob Diddy. Born in a brothel, raised in a jail, proud to be a mongrel, Sieg fucking Heil.
The Police Minister has accused the organiser of a controversial drug rehab program of glamorising gang life, but she's defended the government's decision to give him almost $3 million in funding. Here's Q&A's Jack Tame.
The government is providing almost $3 million to a drug rehab program with close links to the mongrel mob. In an exclusive interview with Q&A, Director Harry Tam said the program works because it's organised by people with gang connections and not traditional care providers.
Because we often assume that, you can just rock on up and say, hey bro, I want to put you through rehab, and it'll be piss off, But if it's somebody that they can trust that comes in there and have the conversations, and you'll be amazed what comes out. People want change, but they don't know how to change.
But immediately after that interview, the Police Minister criticised Tam.
Well, I think the message that he was giving was quite the opposite. It sounded like a recruitment drive for the gangs.
So if that's the case, why would the government give his organisation funding?
Look, I want to be really clear with you. We are not funding the gangs. We are funding a program that has been shown to work.
How does anyone, be it mobsters, bureaucrats, journalists, know where your loyalty lies?
Well, I think my loyalty lies in being a good New Zealander. Jacinda seems to trust me. Why wouldn't you?
Organisers say decades of failed policies show it's time to try something new in dealing with gangs.
We demonise them, right? And we've got reason to hate them, but when they try to do something for themselves, we're going to bash them again anyway.
The 10-week marae-based program will be monitored by several government ministries and externally evaluated. Jack Tame, One News.
The first settlers started to arrive in New Zealand at the beginning of the 19th century. But for decades, Britain tried to avoid any formal commitment because it would involve a lot of cost for not much gain as they saw it. In the 80s, historians and others began to look more closely at the translation, and they found that there were some quite significant discrepancies. In Article 1 of the English version, for example, all sovereignty goes to the Crown. In Article 2 of the translated version, sovereignty, chieftainship remains with the chiefs. So there's full sovereignty goes to the Crown in the English version, but there's a residue that seems to remain with the chiefs in the translated version. And this led to the view that the two versions are irreconcilable. And because of that, the obligation for the tribunal and the courts was to determine what the principles of the treaty are, because the meaning of the texts themselves couldn't be reconciled between this translated version and the English version. So in August 1839, Britain formally recognised Maori sovereignty. It had to, because these treaties could only be signed between sovereign states. It was governed by international law, and it was a fairly conventional colonial treaty for the era. Nowadays, though, the treaty is an internal agreement within a single sovereign state. So the case has been made by some people that technically speaking it's not even a treaty anyway. But what it's been shown generally to be is an agreement that's fairly malleable, that can be shaped and reshaped to fit the circumstances of the time, and it's quite possible in another generation or two it'll have a completely different application and meaning from that which it has now. But the organisation as a whole functions better, it has more input, it has perhaps hapu or iwi involvement, tangata whenua involvement in decision making and so on. And this has been the case throughout the country. If you look at what's happening with councils, with various government departments, and this has been the case throughout the country. If you look at what's happening with councils, with various government departments, that's precisely the experience, the sense of mutual benefit by adopting treaty principles.
Hi, Sue Gray here, co-leader of the New Zealand Outdoors Party. Just before the Outdoors Party had its complaint heard in the Select Committee about the legality of the 5G cell towers, we received a very late reply from Chris Farfoy, Minister of Telecommunications, and he was answering some of my questions about what communications there'd been with the telcos and between the government and different interests, and why the government had seemed to have changed their approach about 5G. So very, very interesting. They've disclosed information between the Prime Minister's office, his office, the various media teams in the Prime Minister's Science Advisor's office, the various media teams in the Prime Minister's Science Advisor's office. And effectively what they've said is the public of New Zealand have been misinformed. If they were given better communications by the government spin team, then they wouldn't really be so concerned about 5G. If they were given better communications by the government spin team, then they wouldn't really be so concerned about 5G. So what the government did was put a lot of effort into educating our media, to explain to our media why 5G is safe and why they can explain to the public of New Zealand that we needn't worry, everything will be fine, trust the government. Now, it's very similar to the strategy the government's been using with COVID, isn't it? And it's not acceptable. Our complaint before the Select Committee could not be answered by the government officials. They cannot answer our questions about whether 5G is safe, what the risks are for fetuses, for older people, for people with different diseases. They can't answer any questions about the effect on bees or trees or on cattle and their milking and on the other agricultural effects. So what do? They tell the media to just present a very simple message that the public is misinformed, and if the public are told that it's safe, then trust the media, trust the government. We can all sit back and be happy that 5G is safe. I'm sorry, it does not work for me. It doesn't work for the Outdoors Party. It's time to get some people into government that are actually representing the public and not the corporates, and not the corporates, and not the corporates.
A new law going into effect in the UK gives the British government sweeping new surveillance capabilities. The Investigatory Powers Act grants intelligence agencies and local authorities the right to access the internet history of any British citizen they target. And it may be the most extreme surveillance act in the Western world. Aris Rousinos reports.
Beginning later this year, the British government will be able to require internet service providers to record the websites and messaging applications their customers visit and keep that information for 1 year. The data will then be available for use by 48 different national and local authorities without the need for a warrant. The saved data won't tell them exactly which pages users visited, but it will show the sites they accessed. David Omond is a former head of GCHQ, the British government's electronic eavesdropping division.
The Investigatory Powers Act gives the British government the most wide-ranging and extensive surveillance capabilities of any democratic state. Why is that necessary?
We have given our secret agencies and police powers to acquire certain information to keep us safe for very good reason, because there are people out there who mean us serious harm.
But do you know who does not feel safe by police? It is Maori. Do you know how many Maori women I have spoken with who are in abusive relationships, and they would rather not call the state because they are more worried about the abuse that they will experience if they phone the police?
I think today will go down in the history of global health. It's a very important day, right up there with the time that UNICEF first committed to universal vaccination. But the good news is that the faster we improve health, the faster family size goes down. But the good news is that the faster we improve health, the faster family size goes down.
Russia is building their own internet, and they recently tested just dropping off the global World Wide Web. So it's a new Cold War. It's East and West have our own web. East and West have our own web.
I'm concerned about the way information is being spread, how the Russians have weaponized it. They are absolutely fighting us tooth and nail beyond what happened with the Cold War every day online with disinformation.
Sputnik was the first man-made thing that ever floated above our heads in outer space. It didn't do anything but send out innocent radio beeps. But Sputnik was earth-shattering. Not only because it was the first man-made thing in space, but because of the rocket that got it there, and what that rocket meant.
The Soviets said the kind of rockets which have taken Sputnik up could also carry nuclear weapons in space. They were using Sputnik to try to scare the United States, to scare Americans into the idea that we were all in danger of some Soviet nuclear weapon coming from space.
The United States is in a state of confusion and surprise.
Sputnik was the 9/11 of our day. People were shocked that Russia had a technology that could do this, and we didn't.
America said, now wait a minute. Russians can't even build a refrigerator. What are they doing putting a Sputnik, a satellite, into orbit?
We were convinced as Americans that we were the dominant power in the world. We had to be. So the idea that our arch enemy, the evil Soviet Empire, could beat us by getting into space first was just devastating. I mean, people were walking around saying, how can this happen? You know, U.S. is number one. What is this?
Apollo 11, this is the launch operations manager.
The launch team wishes you good luck and Godspeed. Thank you very much. No, it'll be a good one.
Three minutes, 25 seconds and counting. We're still go at this time.
Ignition. Liftoff of the Falcon 9 and Crew Dragon. Go NASA. Go SpaceX. Godspeed, Bob and Doug.
America has launched. And so rises a new era of American spaceflight, and with it the ambitions of a new generation continuing the dream.
Why do you think it didn't happen?
Well, there's overwhelming proof that it didn't happen. There's people researching this topic a lot more. We're in the age of technology now. I think in the past, like you're saying, we had no way of verifying anything we were told. So we saw the moon landings. Well, you saw the moon landings, and you believed it, but there was no way for you to check any of it. And now we're in the age of technology. As you said, a lot of the young people believe that it was faked, and that's because they are now investigating for themselves.
I find it very interesting, and we'll talk to Sarah in a minute about the scientific side that she believes. But for me personally, I just think far too many people would have had to
cover it up.
Cover up for far too many years.
Well, how many people
to never have slipped up?
How many people have supposedly gone beyond low Earth orbit, beyond 200 miles off the Earth?
No idea.
24. The entire history of humanity.
But what?
24 people.
So your point is
only 24.
But
so
what
I'm
Ruth's saying
is
is there was a whole control center, operations center, backup control, all sorts of things.
Do you know what happens
Building
in
a
the
rocket.
finance department of ITV?
In the
No
finance
idea.
department?
No idea. Do you know what
checks
happens?
are late.
Do you know what happens in the executive office of ITV, right at the top?
No, but if somebody was covering something
they tell
up-
you nothing. Exactly.
Yeah, but if
so if
somebody was
something did happen,
But if somebody's
would
covering
you...
something up,
Yeah.
everybody would have to cover it up.
No, they wouldn't, because you would know
Sarah,
about
what
it.
do you think?
Well, there are also a lot of engineers, of course, working on these for years and years. They had to come into their job every morning thinking they were developing a rocket. And that's thousands of people being involved in the development and the testing in the labs, people overseeing the labs. It's not only the 24 people who actually went off the Earth. It's the whole organization of NASA and the Apollo program.
The position of the sun shadows, you will add to that today, using today's technology, you cannot see footprints, which you believe shouldn't have ever blown away.
Yep. Well, here's the smoking gun. Here's the smoking gun. We can argue all day long about, you know, what I think, we've never been to the moon. None of us have been, you know, below the surface, a certain, you know, altitude. Now, the only way we can discern whether this happened or not is by analyzing and studying the actual data that was taken during those Apollo missions, right? The scientific
that's not
data.
true. That's not true.
Hold on, let me finish, right? So that's the telemetry data, right? So during those 4 years that they did the Apollo missions, they collected loads of data, you know, biometrical data, design blueprints, etc., right? To end this, if we had the data now, and we could scrutinize it, if we could test it, which is the scientific method, test it, observe,
it's not
and
been
research. Not only has it not been released, NASA destroyed it.
Well, or lost
Why
it.
would they have destroyed it?
NASA
Or lost it, or they're not
hang on. Donald Petit, NASA astronaut and chemical engineer. This is a direct quote from him. There's a video of him actually saying this, and I quote, "I'd go to the moon in a nanosecond. The problem is we don't have the technology to do that anymore. We used to, but we destroyed the technology, and it's a painful process to build up again."
Oh, of course, in that context, absolutely. In that context, absolutely. I completely agree with him. The technology we had at the time was so ridiculously obsolete. There was nothing we could do with it anymore. It's like if you have a car from 60 years ago that was unique. If you try to repair all the parts one by one, it's going to take you way too much money. We don't run cars that way anymore. It was scrapped eventually because it was just too outdated. So, of course, it was destroyed, the technology in that sense. We don't have it anymore. It wouldn't run.
But Sarah, we got the technology together to go there. Why haven't we been back since, the 70s?
I think it comes down to the funding. I think after America went to the moon a few times, the people in power told the voters, why are we spending so much money on this? Why don't we elect a party who will put our taxes to do something else? And unfortunately, it was the last time in history where so much of your taxes went to science and research and technology. It's been cut down a lot, I think, mostly for political reasons.
But you see, Martin actually believes what we think. Some people believe the moon's made of cheese. What do you think the moon is made of?
What I know the moon is, it's a luminary. That's all I know.
What, it shines?
It's a luminary. It's a luminary of some sort. So I can't go beyond that. And again, we're living in the age of technology. You've got a P900 camera now you can buy for under £1,000.
Yeah.
And you can zoom in to the moon. That's supposed to be, by the way, 238,000 miles away in deep dark space. And yet you can zoom in quite close in detail with a commercial camera. And people have taken photographs and images showing it sometimes translucent. You can see through it, right? Sometimes it's got something called a lunar wave. There are many videos showing the moon with a lunar wave. We don't know what that is.
There's nothing wrong with people looking at data themselves and looking at buying their own cameras and taking their own data and so on. I think the main problem with the moon conspiracy is that the people involved that would have to cover it up now also involve people in Japan with this new satellite, people in Russia, people in Australia, who would all have to be covering up when they do this follow-up.
People going under the desk. I heard the chief of the department. I heard the chief of the department. I heard the chief of the department yell, "The tower has come down. The tower has come down."
On September the 12th, 2001. What would you have done if you'd been president?
What would I have done?
Yeah.
I would have done a legitimate investigation to find out what exactly happened on 9/11. How did they know who did this so quickly like they did Lee Harvey Oswald? How quick they knew Lee Harvey Oswald killed Kennedy.
Because the people who did it were identified and we knew who they were.
Well, then why couldn't we have stopped them beforehand if they were identified and we knew who they were?
It was a failure of intelligence. Everyone's accepted
No, it
that.
wasn't. We knew before with Condoleezza Rice's memo on August 6th when it stated right in the memo, bin Laden to steal planes and run them into buildings. And more stuff is coming out now also, how much the Bush administration ignored the intelligence. It was almost like they ignored it because they wanted it to happen.
Oh, come off it, Jesse.
No, not oh, come off it. Wait a minute.
No.
Every war fought starts with a false flag operation.
You can't, in all seriousness, sit there and try and make out anybody.
Okay, let me ask you this, Piers. Wait a minute. Let me ask you something. How much studying have you actually done of 9/11 other than what the government's told you and what mainstream media has told you? I've been studying it 4 years.
I was editor of a national newspaper.
I've talked to people.
Wait a minute. Depth every day for 5-6 months.
Really?
So I know a lot about it.
Well,
and one thing I do know is,
let me ask you this then.
You cannot say that any member of the Bush administration knew it was going to happen or wanted it to happen. It's a ridiculous thing to say.
Ridiculous. Okay, let's talk about your BBC. I have a tape of a BBC reporter broadcasting directly back to England talking about a third building has collapsed. World Trade Center Building 7 talks for 7 minutes. All the while she's talking, World Trade Center Building 7 is still standing right behind her. It didn't fall for another half hour. Yet they were doing a pre-broadcast back to England that, yes, it's true,
you need to
that this building fell and it hadn't fallen.
And New Shepard has cleared the tower on our way to space with our first human crew. Go, Jeff, go, Mark, go, Molly, go, Oliver. You are going to space.
How we've been deprived of our generational wealth. How black people were resilient. How we had unity back in the day. We worked together. We were dependent upon each other to live fruitful lives. we're talking about a generation that was lost from family members that are not here today. That's generational wealth that literally was.
And this has led descendants and other family members who may not be descendants to take the opportunity to look into their family histories, into their legacies, and get to know who their family members were.
In a 1971 speech to Congress, President Richard Nixon called drug abuse America's public enemy number one. In the same speech, he declared war on drug addiction, and since then, the war on drugs has been a controversial policy issue for the United States. After 4 decades, we want to know, did the war on drugs work? Well, in the last 44 years, Nixon's connection between crime and drugs has had far-reaching consequences, particularly in terms of race. Human Rights Watch has reported that in the 70s, African Americans in the U.S. were already being overrepresented in drug arrests, with twice as many arrests as Caucasians. But since the war on drugs began, African Americans have been arrested for drug offenses at 5 times the rate of white offenders. And yet, on average, Caucasians commit more drug crimes. Part of the reason for this discrepancy has been attributed to unfair drug sentencing laws, specifically targeted toward minorities and the poor. In 1986, President Ronald Reagan signed a bill that authorized the Anti-Drug Abuse Act. This enacted mandatory minimum sentences for convictions concerning a number of drugs, including 2 forms of cocaine. Crack cocaine, which was cheaper and more commonly used by the lower class, carried a mandatory minimum sentence of 5 years for 5 grams. For the more expensive powdered cocaine, one would need 500 grams for the same sentence. This 100-to-1 disparity, along with other similar drug laws, skyrocketed the number of minority drug arrests. Only in 2010 did President Barack Obama authorize a bill that lessened the gap in drug sentencing. The Drug Policy Alliance reports that annually, the U.S. spends more than $51 billion on the war on drugs, and in 2013 arrested 1.5 million people on nonviolent drug charges. In fact, some estimates place the total amount spent by the federal government on the war on drugs as high as $1 trillion. And yet, addiction rates have been unaffected, drug prices have dropped considerably, and the U.S. has the highest incarceration rates in the world. In 2010, more than half of all federally incarcerated prisoners were serving drug-related sentences. Even the CIA has been implicated in the trafficking of illegal drugs. With marijuana legalization slowly spreading across the U.S. and the success of drug decriminalization in countries like Portugal and Uruguay, it is clear that the war on drugs has failed.
If the police operate on a consent basis, how is it that they are able to enter onto Māori whenua? And the simple answer is, the Ministry of Justice are the primary landowners. And this is the crazy thing that we don't realize, is that it all operates on a consent basis. So as a landowner, we have to give consent for someone to come on to arrest someone. How do they pass that? Well, these fellas over here. And what they don't realize is underneath the he whakapūtanga and te reti o Waitangi, we are classed as infants of the state. And it clearly states in these documents that all infants that are underneath the guardian careship of the state will receive all land dividends. Now you think about it, as an organisation you have to share information as you transfer money from one organisation to another. Now, Māori are known as one of the biggest trust beneficiaries in New Zealand, but me, I don't see any pūtea. Why is that? Well, these guys siphon it out. And the way they do it is they pick on big Māori families and ensure that they are underneath the care and kingship of their system to ensure that we construct it. So the obvious question comes like this. Us, tangata, have paid for the Ministry of Justice system. And it is crazy that a system that is set up to not only look after our land affairs, but is the same system that prosecutes us and sentences us to prison. I'm ashamed to say that we as Māori will always be infants of the state unless underneath the guardianship of our father, the Ministry of Justice. For Māori to grow out of this new and come into this new upbringing and coming, we need to migrate our information out from these people and into our own system.
Of those of us who supported the signing of our treaty settlement.
And the way they do it is they pick on big Māori families and ensure that they are underneath the care and kingship of their system.
Since that time, that endorsement from all of you has been acknowledged by the Crown. So over the last few weeks we have been working as a board to progress our treaty settlement. Early in the new year there will be a hui to bring us all together to sign the relationship agreements with a number of Crown agencies, and for the Crown to present its apology for its actions over previous generations to all of us as a people. In the meantime, the board has also decided that we will look to sign the deed of settlement, and that we will sign that deed of settlement within the restrictions of the current COVID environment. That means that we're not able to gather and come together, so this signing will be conducted essentially on the papers.
And the way they do it is they pick on big Māori families and ensure that they are underneath the care and kingship of their system.
As soon as it is safe, we will all come together, we will meet with the Crown, we will conclude the settlement process, and we will look to set the new relationship between ourselves and the Crown. Nō reira, kei aku rangatira tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa.
Thank you for speaking the truth, brother. Fucking awesome. Cheer. Way to go, guys. Me. Fuck yeah, brother. Who are you with? Yeah, just stay right there, brother. My brother. Thank you, brother. Who are you fellas with, my bro?
We're working with our films from here.
Okay. So independent.
Toot, put the kids in the car.
Thanks, bro.
Same place, same fucking time, same thing happened to Fred. Anyway, this fucking egg comes over to me, takes off his shades, and says the classic line. The classic. Wait for it.
Waiting.
What the fuck you staring at, man?
Yeah.
So I say to him, cool ass. Well, not you, mate. Your spunky missus. Trouble is, she was fucking uglier than him. Then all hell broke loose.
Oh, old Jimmy, eh? Hey, you can stay at my place tonight, mate.
Yeah, fuck it, why not? Beth, boy, give the lady a seat.
You fucking animal.
What the fuck?
Women and children, eh? You fucking coward.
You just control your mister there, mate.
Who the fuck you think you are coming in here mouthing off at my mate? Get the fucking hell out of here before I kick your bloody head in.
It's always your answer, eh, Jake? Violence. It's bad enough that you did it here. But you brought it home with you and I damn well let you.
What the fuck are you on about now?
It was violence that killed my Grace. She didn't have an ounce of violence in her, Jake. But we made damn sure it was all around her.
She killed herself.
You bloody bastard. It was your bloody mate who handed her the rope.
Yeah, I don't have a clue what you're on about, eh?
Fucking child.
Shut up, Nick! You animal. You raped a 13-year-old girl, then sat here drinking with her father while the rest of us buried her.
She's off her fucking head, man.
Sneaking around my house and laying your dirty, filthy fucking hands on my baby! My Grace!
Hey, you're not on the fucking Mariah now, eh? So don't come in here accusing my mates of shit!
Hey, come on, man. Look, no one's thinking straight. We're family, right? Beth, sit down. Have a drink.
And I'm straight with you, fucking animal!
Read it. Uncle Bully.
Fucking bully!
son.
Yeah, bro. Awesome.
Here's a card for if you want
to
get hold of us after. Because what we'll need to do is we'll need to get you on my phone, just giving us a contact. Because then we can contact you tomorrow or the days after once we've
nice
tried
dress,
to
bro.
log all the footage.
Cool, bro.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah, fuck, look at the world we live in today, whānau.
So, brother, can you tell us your name and what you're doing today?
He mihi ki tātua, he whakaronori nā tangata whenua o Aotearoa. So I stuck with him and I'm from Mighty Maniapoto. Got a whāngai mum there, I was raised there with my brothers and stuff, but I'm here because everyone in Tipuriti, they go to the meatworks, they go to the sawmill, they come home and watch TVNZ, or they read an article by Stuff, or New Zealand Herald, or anything like that. And it's 100%, it's like millions of dollars spent to lie, especially to tangata whenua. And that's why I think so many Māori went out and got those jabs at the start. There's so much ads. Look at tupuna. It was so sick. It's sick, man. I do it for my whakapapa. Yeah. What? Give all our land away again to fuckers for a jab that'll kill us. And like my son, he got the blood nose. Everyone was like, oh, I had blood nose when I was young, son. And then now he's got the ringing in the ear. Oh, Mark, he had ringing in the ears. It's just people just keep making up excuses. The left had the bruising all down his left leg. Just a lot of people that were really pro at the start are now sending me messages via the MSN just saying they've changed, and they're showing me all of the facts, stats, that medsave.government.nz, and it shows the 117 people that have got the vaccine and not young. You know what I mean? So it's quite scary. And I've got parents in my town, and in my town we have a king. It should be the king of all Māori, because we're Maniapoto. When the Māori went looking for a king, they came to the Maniapoto and they got Riwi, right? He's got a proper Māori name, but I'm not enough to say that name, so I'll just call him Riwi Maniapoto. But he should be the king. Our king right now is a guy called Keith Aiken, and he should be the king of all Māori. And Redi Amanu, which is one of our tribes, told Keith, we don't want to be with the government, Keith, and he still sold them out. He still sold them out. And if you go to the Maniapoto Trust Board, you can see him mocking Redi Amanu and saying, I waited for them long enough, but they couldn't see how we were going. But he never heard of He whawhai tonu mātou, ake, we're never going to give up, Keith. But he gave up. And now he shows pictures of him on his farm on Facebook, which he says he's from Tauranga, not Maniapoto, Waitomo. And he's pretty fucking gross, and that's the world we live in, my friend. So I'm just here to tell my whānau the other side, because today there's a shitload of people here, but on the news tonight they might say there was 100 people, and they spread the disease, and it's their fault, and the shit that media does. So I'm here to show the whānau, people like you, real people. So matapla, a lot of matapla, right? A lot of Pākehā in here, man. A lot of tuki.
Get the point, bro. Get the point. What do you think about all of the mandates of the traffic light system coming in that the government's bringing in?
I'm 100% behind Maori Hapu getting their land, their water, their assets, and their fishing back just for them. Maori had their own school. That Hapu can run their own school like they do in Waitomo and out in Upururi, got their own school for Maori kids. And those kids don't commit suicide. Do you know what I mean? Those kids don't do that. It's like Māori kids in the Pākehā world that fucking have no future and they give up. But so we're meant to have our own banking system that is meant to help us get a fucking house. You know what I mean? We're meant to have a health system that makes us so healthy. We can't even get the flu, let alone a fucking injection or something that doesn't kill anybody, and he should be sick. You know, and all the stats already say that. And I'm trying to fucking beg to this guy, Keith Aiken, can you wake the fuck up, brother? Because in the end, one of my kids gets hurt or dies. You know what I mean? This is the other trick they did. So for them to sign with the government, they had to have 75% agreed by the Maniapoto people, which is 40,000 people. But they do a trick where only the ones registered count, just like this COVID thing, where they say, oh, we've got 90% vaxxed. No, you got 90% of people registered vaxxed, which might only be 1 million people. And they did the same to the Maniapoto people, where they got 5,000 people, share my brother, 5,000 people to sign their thing with the government, the settlement, that we should never have a settlement. He did that even though 40,000, 35,000 Maniapoto didn't even know it happened. So he's a sick, indoctrinated Pākehā man working for the Pākehā system, and my kids suffer. And they can go to trust board and get a $40 fucking loan for school instead of a $100,000 donor farm bullshit. Hey, brother, millions, trillions of dollars in the money puts, bro. We got everything. We got everything. What sort of world do you want to see, bro? Well, I'm Indigenous to Ireland, Scotland, Germany. I've got, I don't know if you know Denisovan or Neanderthal blood. Like, your DNA is back, bro. We're all African. Because, like, right now, this is a weird one, but if I took everyone's heads and Usain Bolt, and we put all our skin off our heads in the thing, and it was just skulls, you couldn't tell the difference between me, you, or Usain Bolt, because we're all African, brother. It's a million years of, because the woman's genes is the strongest, that lady from Africa, we've all become her family. And people don't, like, Neanderthal couldn't put their arm over their head, brother. Well, I look like I'm dunk a basketball, because I'm like more black than I am white. The only thing white left is the eye colour and the fucked up hair. But if you can check that out on Google, but like, no one wants to go to Google because the mainstream media has told us that finding your own research is wrong. Only Pfizer knows the truth. It's pretty sad. Sorry about that. Next question is, surely
8 months have passed since we reported this. Pfizer has not changed. It is still putting profits above public health. It is still forcing governments to bend to its will. An advocacy group has thrown up more details of what Pfizer does. It has accessed some confidential contracts of Pfizer. And we have a copy. These contracts are with 9 countries and blocks, and the details are shocking. Desperate countries are being forced to make humiliating concessions to Pfizer. We went through the entire report. We found 6 very important points worth highlighting. Number 1, Pfizer has the right to silence governments. It has forced countries to not talk about the deals they strike for shots. Number 2, Pfizer controls the donations of its shots, not the country that buys them. Pfizer will decide where the shots go. Number 3, Pfizer has secured an intellectual property waiver for itself, and this clause is particularly disturbing. If Pfizer is accused of intellectual property theft, governments will pay, not the company. Number 4, if there are disputes, private arbitrators and not public courts will decide on them. Number 5, Pfizer can go after state assets to secure its compensation. And number 6, Pfizer calls the shots on all key decisions. It decides delivery timelines and more. These are very serious revelations. I'll give you some more details. Number 1, Pfizer is silencing governments. How? Through contracts. These airtight contracts are at the center of everything. They can silence governments in ways you can't even imagine. Look at what happened in Brazil. Pfizer agreed to supply its Wuhan virus vaccines to Brazil. And it sneaked in this clause in the agreement to force Brazil to not share any specifics about its deal with Pfizer. Let me read it out for you. This is what it says. The Brazilian government is prohibited from making any public announcement concerning the existence, subject matter, or terms of the agreement, or commenting on its relationship with Pfizer without the prior written consent of the company. In other words, Brazil cannot talk about the Pfizer deal until it gets an approval from Pfizer in writing. This basically is a private company muzzling a government. And that's not all. Pfizer also gets to decide who will get the shot. Suppose someone wants to donate Pfizer shots to Brazil. Can they do it? They cannot. The Pfizer agreement restricts Brazil from accepting donations. No one can donate Pfizer vaccines to this country. They cannot use the Pfizer shot until they buy it. What happens if Brazil does not comply with these rules? The consequences will be serious. Let me quote from the report again. If Brazil were to accept donated doses without Pfizer's permission, it would be considered an uncurable material breach of their agreement, allowing Pfizer to immediately terminate the agreement. Upon termination, Brazil would be required to pay the full price for any remaining contracted doses. So Brazil will have to cough up the entire payment, and Pfizer won't even have to supply the full consignment of Wuhan virus shots. What happens if someone accuses Pfizer of stealing its vaccine technology, of intellectual property theft? The government will be forced to defend Pfizer. It's unbelievable. We had to read this twice to let it sink in. And guess what? At least 4 countries have been forced to protect Pfizer's patent. Meaning these governments are defending Pfizer for intellectual property theft. While the company is free to use anyone's intellectual property as it pleases. Colombia is one of these victims. I'll explain with an example. Suppose a domestic vaccine maker or any pharma company in Colombia goes to court and they accuse Pfizer of infringing their vaccine patent. Who will be the one fighting that case? Not Pfizer. Even though they're the accused party, it's not Pfizer and their lawyers who will be in court. It will be the Colombian government. The government will have to defend Pfizer. And if they lose the case, it will be the Colombian government that will have to pay the settlement, not Pfizer. What if these governments want to get out of these tough contracts? They won't be able to sue Pfizer at home. The matter will go to a secret panel of 3 private arbitrators in New York. Pfizer will be tried as per New York law and not the laws of the land where it sells vaccines. And these countries will pay heavily if they lose in arbitration. Pfizer can ask a government to shift control of state assets to compensate for losses. Pfizer can ask a government to shift control of state assets to compensate for losses. What kind of assets are we talking about here? Practically anything that a sovereign government owns. Foreign bank accounts, foreign investments, commercial property, state-owned airlines, even oil companies. Pfizer can take over any or all of these from a government. Commercial property, state-owned airlines, even oil companies. Pfizer can take over any or all of these from a government. Basically, everything happens on Pfizer terms once a country decides to buy its vaccine. Even the delivery of shots is decided by the company. In Brazil, in Albania, in Colombia, Pfizer gets to decide the delivery timetable for vaccines, and the countries will have to agree to whatever they're given, whenever they're given. Pfizer, of course, gets to decide the price. It sets the delivery timelines. It accepts accountability for nothing. And in case someone sues the company, it's the government that foots the bill for the damages, not Pfizer. It accepts accountability for nothing. And in case someone sues the company, it's the government that foots the bill for the damages, not Pfizer. There is no other way to describe Pfizer's business practices. This is vaccine terrorism. Is vaccine terrorism. Is vaccine terrorism.
Tanzania's government is hoping to fight the coronavirus pandemic. Having refused vaccines for its citizens, the health ministry is urging the public to practice hygiene and use traditional medicine to treat COVID-19.
We will be an example of doing what we are directing the public to do, whether it is exercise, whether it is nutrition, herbal steaming, or using traditional medicinal products. We will be at the forefront to do those things openly as a lesson so that others follow.
The health ministry says there are about 5 different locally made herbal remedies that have been approved by the government chemist, with more in the pipeline. One of the latest to be approved is Udanol, which is produced by the University of Dar es Salaam.
A team of 12 people from various backgrounds and knowledge came together to research some of the plants that could help in the fight against diseases related to the respiratory system. So we identified plants that can be used as medicine to tackle respiratory problems.
The government says recent reports of a new strain of the COVID-19 virus in various countries, including some bordering Tanzania, are behind the move to encourage the use of herbal remedies.
Last year, the World Health Organization agreed on the rules for the testing of African herbal remedies to fight COVID-19. It was agreed that sound science would be the sole basis for safe and effective traditional therapies to be adopted, and that any traditional remedies that are judged to be effective can be fast-tracked for large-scale manufacturing. Any traditional remedies that are judged to be effective can be fast-tracked for large-scale manufacturing.
The World Health Organization recommends that countries roll out approved COVID-19 vaccines as soon as possible.
The population growth goes down as we improve health. The population growth goes down as we improve health.
Fuck that shit, we on video. Tukuri, fuck famous ass. Kilda, thank you so much. Oh, spiders.
Yeah,
That's the way beautiful girls. That's what beautiful girls can do. Normal fellas can't do that shit.
Yeah, you serve us. Kia ora. It's Hapu whenua. It's Hapu whenua. 250 years of stealing from Maori. 250 years of stealing from Maori. We're all indigenous to a part of the world. We need to look after the indigenous. Either you are Scottish, Irish, African. Let's look after the Maori first. We're all indigenous. Look after the Hapu.
Cheers, brother.
Cheers, brother.
Cheers, brother.
Anyone want to say you serve us or anything loud? I got the equipment.
There you go, man.
Oh, no, I'm good.
Have a go. There you go. Yeah, go, go. Wait, brother, that's right. Sorry, yes.
Are you able to just wait for the other speaker to speak?
Can you tell me your full name and date of birth, please, Will? William Sasha Perry, 20th of the 7th, 1974. Awesome.
Yeah, here's the time around. Whoa, he's spotted. Oh, they weren't expecting that, actually.
Hey, bro, good shot, bro, good shot. No, King Country, brother, King Country. I'm hanging with the best. Oh, man.
Way to go, Farno. Yeah. Working, Farno. Working. True. Oh, that's both sides this time, Farno. There was only one side last time. Leave on my spoon. Way to go, Farno.
What are you gonna do, bro? Just say.
I'll just travel whatever way the current's going and then hopefully take some fish that are down there.
Fucking beautiful day, eh, Fano? Look at this shit. Awesome. Fuck, good luck, brother. Fuck, hope it goes well. Share more, bro.
People here. How can you sit by and watch this happen? Be on the right side of history! On the right side! There's always a way. Just 1,000 people according to the Herald. We were in the prison the whole time. Stick your Brexit mandate up your ass. Mandate up your ass. Now that you're here, I hope you're all listening.
We the taxpayer pay to keep this fucking boring clean. We pay that. And these fucking lawns.
Who's the majority right now?
Who's the minority right now? Well, you can't get her pregnant! Well, she can't get pregnant!
That's happened, man. That's fucking happened, man. Stillborns and that.
Is that what's going on? Well, when your daughter can't produce eggs, when she can't produce eggs, you don't fucking have grandchildren! Duh! You fucking thick! Well, when your daughter can't produce eggs, when she can't produce eggs, you don't fucking have grandchildren! Duh! You fucking thick!